Good morning, and welcome to the annual observation of Patriot Day, where we will remember and honor all those that were lost on that tragic day 20 years ago. I'm Matt Halleck, Fire Chief for the City of Monterey Park Fire Department, and I will be the Master of Ceremonies for today's event. Due to the current situation with COVID-19, we are recording our ceremony with no audience. Health and safety are of the utmost importance to us, and we look forward to in-person ceremonies in the near future. To begin the ceremony, I would like to ask officers of the Monterey Park Police Department Honor Guard to present the colors.
Honor Guard! Ready, march! Forward, march!
No, please stand.
Left, right, left, 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 right, left, 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 left. Honor Guard, ready, hold, left, face, present, arms.
Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order, arms. Outward, face. Forward, march. Honor Guard, prepare to post colors. Post colors. Present arms. Order, arms. Outward, face. Forward, march. Left, 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 right, left, 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 right, left, left,
Please be seated. Now I would like to ask a representative of the Monterey Park Police Department and the Monterey Park Fire Department to place the memorial wreath. The wreath is in remembrance of all who perished on September 11th, 2001, and those in uniform who have lost their lives in the war on terrorism. I would now like to introduce a number of our dignitaries who have joined us today. Mayor Yvonne Yu, Mayor Pro Tem Henry Lowe, who will be joining. Oh, he snuck in there. Councilmember Fred Sornoso, Councilmember Peter Chan, Councilmember Hans Leong, and City Clerk Vincent Chang. Representing some of our offices in the local area, representing the office of Hilda Solis, we have Florencio Briones. Representing Honorable Judy Chu, we have Lauren Jacobs. And representing the office of Susan Rubio, we have Jamie Lex Rodriguez. This year, both Chief Gordon and I will remember and reflect upon each of our respective professions and the impacts of 9/11/2001. With that, I would like to introduce Police Chief Kelly Gordon.
The terrorist attacks on September 11th, 2001 stunned the nation. For me, it is hard to believe that it's been 20 years. And I must admit, as I actually go off my script, this morning I was actually all ready and put together and listening to the bagpipes and having a moment to sit and reflect actually brought back a whole lot of emotion for me this morning. So basically I'm going to throw out my script and I'm just going to speak from the heart right now. For those of you that don't know, I spent almost 2 weeks in New York City on the grounds of 9/11. I was there about a week after, and I did search and rescue efforts. At the time, I had a disaster search canine. We were tasked for looking for living survivors, but the reality is that we knew that we were trying to bring home those that lost their lives to their families. And we recovered and brought home a lot to their families. And remembering back on all the sights, smells, and sounds that I will never forget, including bringing those that were in the fire and law enforcement service out of the ruins, in stretchers, draped with the American flag. And, over 3,000 Americans lost their lives that day. 72 law enforcement lost their lives that day. About 4 times that many have lost their lives since then from all the toxins that they experienced of being at 9/11. And the continued search efforts that went on for a long time. And the efforts still haven't stopped to bring everyone home to their family. I think 2 more have been positively identified this week to bring some closure to their families, and that's 20 years later. I think it's really important that we all continue to reflect and talk about the events of September 11th. Our younger generation needs to understand the huge impact that it had on all of us, and both in a negative and a positive effect. The country was never more unified after September 11th. And I hope that we can again, at one time, find that unity. Law enforcement's been forever changed by the events of September 11th. Terrorism became one of the most, and still is, difficult challenges that law enforcement's ever faced. How do we keep people safe? Both locally, nationally, and abroad. We have learned a great deal. Now we have federal, local, international agencies all working together for the betterment of all of our communities. And here's the one thing that, I'm gonna actually go back to my script on, is that I ask that today, instead of really focusing on the horrific images that you're gonna see back on the TV today, which by the way, I won't be turning on. I don't need to watch TV, I know. I'd like you to remember the heroism of law enforcement and other first responders. They ran into the mayhem and destruction because of their heart and honor. No different than the men and women to my left would do faced under the same circumstances. Numerous lives were saved by the courage of first responders. And that should bring us hope. And I would really encourage you that that is what you focus on today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Gordon. I would like to take a second to now introduce Congressmember Judy Chu, who has graciously has been able to be a part of our ceremony today, and also Vin No from the school board is also in attendance today. So thank you very much. Okay, it's hard to believe. Oh, take this off. Excuse me. It's hard to believe that 20 years have passed since that tragic day where so many lives were lost. In public safety, we often focus on the first responders that paid that ultimate sacrifice in their duties to save countless lives in both of the towers. That fateful day, 343 members of the FDNY perished as the towers came crashing down. In addition, 72 of our brothers and sisters in law enforcement also paid that sacrifice. A total of over 3,000 people lost their lives that day. Since the initial attacks on 9/11/2001, over 250 firefighters have since died as a result of cancer or other illnesses directly related to their work on 9/11 in the days and weeks after. I was recently in North Carolina for a fire conference. It was kicked off by a speakers panel that had 3 members that were all actively involved with the events of 9/11. The panel was made up of an FDNY battalion chief, the FDNY commissioner of the fire department, and an FBI special agent that conducted the investigation and the intelligence from that event. While all 3 shared heartbreaking stories of what took place that fateful day, what really hit home for me was listening to the battalion chief, Joseph Pfeiffer. Listening to him speak and recount those events from that tragic day, you could still hear anguish in his voice 20 years later. The loss of thousands of civilians during one single event. The loss of 343 firefighters, also at one single event. While that is something that seems almost impossible to ever recover from, what added to his anguish is, as the incident commander, he sent his own brother, also a New York City firefighter, into the towers to assist with the rescue. His brother was one of the 343 firefighters who died when the towers collapsed. The burden he must carry is unimaginable. A book I read in the 6th grade was called Report from Engine Company 82. It was written by a New York City firefighter named Dennis Smith. Upon reading this book, I knew right then and there I wanted to be a firefighter. The time was the 60s in New York. Firefighter Smith worked in the South Bronx, which was one of the busiest sections of New York. The stories of heroism in this book and the camaraderie of the fire service was something I knew I wanted to be a part of. The reason I bring this book up is that in the book, the details of life inside Fire Station 82 were detailed. There's a sign that hangs on the wall that reads, "Tonight could be the night." This job is a dangerous one, and in the South Bronx, fires were a regular thing, even multiple per day. Line of duty deaths were an all too common occurrence. This could be the night was a reminder of the dangers of this profession. With traditions what they are in the fire service, I wouldn't doubt if that sign was hanging in the station on September 11, 2001. However, I'm certain that when every New York City firefighter reported for duty that morning, what was to happen and the outcome was not something they were prepared for or something that they ever imagined could or would happen. I was just recently in Washington, D.C. to drop my daughter off at her internship for college. While there, we visited numerous monuments that were erected to honor and remember some of the great leaders of America. Each of these honored servants led America through very difficult times. President Abraham Lincoln led this nation through a civil war that saw hundreds of thousands of Americans killed. President Franklin Roosevelt led our nation through a world war. Martin Luther King led our nation through a period of time where the civil rights of all Americans was in jeopardy. While there is no monument to a leader that provided guidance and direction through the difficult times after the attacks of 9/11, I think it's the American people that banded together to steer America into the direction of hope, promise, and an idea that while we were attacked, there is no keeping America down. There was a quote on the wall at the FDR monument. I wrote it down because I really felt that given the fact that we were approaching the September 11th, 20th anniversary, it was very timely. The quote was, "The only limit to our realization of tomorrow will be our doubts of today." Our realization of tomorrow was temporarily altered on 9/11. However, we proved as a nation that whatever happens today, tomorrow will come, and we did, and we always will, find hope. In that, we will never forget. Now, to correspond with the attacks at 8:46 a.m., the time the first plane, American Airlines Flight 11, struck our North Tower of the World Trade Center, please join me in a moment of silence. If you could all please rise. Thank you. Please be seated. Now it is my pleasure to invite the dignitaries to come up and say a few words. I'd like to introduce Mayor Yvonne Yu.
Hi everyone, this is Yvonne Yu, Mayor of Monterey Park. Today it marked the 20th anniversary of September 11, and it's the most devastating attack in the world. I still remember 20 years ago, I was watching TV. I see big words flashing on the TV saying that it's not a movie, but it was like a movie. I see plane crashes to the Twin Tower, and it ended up 4 plane crash and almost 3,000 people was killed. I also remember that I know a group of people at Morgan Stanley. They were at the 61st floor of the World Trade Center. And I heard a lot of stories from the survivors. I still remember one story that they were saying they was rushing down the stairs, but then they were shocked to see all the firefighters actually walking up the stair to save lives. So today we are also honoring the first responder as well. And thank you for their sacrifices. And yesterday, when I bring back all the memories, I suddenly remember that when I first graduated from college, I had a very attractive job offer from Morgan Stanley Investment Bank, but they want me to relocate to New York, which is about 20-some years ago. And I'm glad that I turned down the offer to stay with my family here in California. So today, let's have a moment to remember all the heroes. And I want to thank everyone for your time. And may God bless the United States of America. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem Henry Lowe.
Thank you, Chief Halleck, and thank you everyone for being here today on this very somber occasion. I want to begin by also thanking Chief Gordon for those very poignant words in commemoration of her experiences 20 years ago. I think all of us probably remember where we were on that infamous day 20 years ago. I know, certainly I do. And I think, for me, when I think about, what are some of the lessons of 9/11, I am reminded of how 9/11 challenged our nation as a country and our unity. We saw the strength of our unity when we saw the millions of Americans who came together to remember the 3,000 people who died that day and the thousands more who were injured. As Americans, we were united in honoring and remembering and celebrating the valor and courage of those first responders, the police, the fire, the medical personnel who were heroes on that day. We remember the men and women of the armed services who put themselves in harm's way on the war on terror to protect our democracy and our freedoms. And certainly, 9/11, I think, brought the best in us in our unity as a country. But unfortunately, 9/11 also, I think, brought the challenges that we face as a unified nation. The rise in phobia against Muslim Americans, the rise of hate crimes for those who are of the Islamic faith, and those who have used 9/11 as an excuse to scapegoat others, to promote an agenda of xenophobia and nativism. And I think that, for me, the lessons, on this 20th anniversary of 9/11 is that, we as Americans, we are a resilient people. We are a nation of diversity. We are a nation that is united. We see the best of us. We've seen the best of us during this pandemic, in this community, in this state, in this country. And I think in moving forward, as I reflect on how we move forward as a nation, I think it is incumbent upon all of us to remember what unites us, our collective values, what brings us together as a community, as a state. And I think that to do justice for those who lost their lives on 9/11, let's strive to be a more unified community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Lowe. I now ask Councilmember Fred Sornoso to come on up.
Hi, good morning. So today we remember 9/11. I remember seeing Chief Gordon up here with the tear coming down her eye. I mean, it was a very emotional day that day. It's something you just don't believe. But the things that stood into my mind were just the next day after, when you drive around the city with people with American flags on their homes and on their cars. The church services, I mean, I was a marathon runner back then and belonged to a running group, and we were supposed to meet on Thursday night, and I decided not to go and went to church. I mean, there wasn't a service scheduled, but the church was full of people, no praying. I ran a marathon the next month in October in Connecticut, and I wasn't due to fly back for a couple of days, so I took a bus to New York City and was able to go to the 9/11 site with the chain link fence and all the photographs on the fence and all the dust. Just very sad. So, today, as everyone else said, we all have busy lives, but it's good just to take some time to reflect on what happened. Again, just want to thank all the first responders who gave their lives and sacrificed part of their lives on that day, and thank all our police and fire. I mean, if something like that happened here, I'm sure they'd be quick to respond. And just thank you for what you do for us. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Sornoso. I now ask Councilmember Peter Chan. No? Oh, I'm sorry. Hans Leong.
Thank you, Chief Halleck. Excuse me. Since Patriot Day was designated on September 11th, I believe the City of Monterey Park every year has put together a ceremony in recognition of that. I want to thank Chief Halleck. I want to thank Chief Kelly Gordon. I want to thank all of the first responders here in the City of Monterey Park and all through the nation. For those of you who are viewing this, I don't know if you can see, but we have all of our fire trucks, our police cars with their lights on, and it's I really want to thank you guys for really always every year taking the time to present such a honorable and dignified Patriot Day recognition. Also, I see that we have the bell here. I want to also thank the fire department for sharing a part of your traditions and culture on recognizing those that have been lost. It's interesting when you think about it, because 20 years ago it seems so long, but then 20 years later, again, in the midst of COVID, it's our first responders that are in the front again, to make sure that we're okay. It's them doing their duty to make sure that we're okay. And again, in the City of Monterey Park with Matt, Kelly, and all of you here, you've always done such a great job. I've always been forward thinking and always been doing your best to represent and protect the residents of the City of Monterey Park. And I think that really goes into, a lot of what Kelly said. we do see the advertisements on TV about the shows recalling all the things that happened. And, while I agree with Kelly, we don't want to remind ourselves of the suffering, but I think also we want to, while we're doing that, to take the time to be grateful for all of those that protect us and serve us here in the City of Monterey Park. And also, we think about the lives lost, but also take a moment to give, solace, if you will, to those families who are currently still here. And every year that September 11th happens, we'll be reminded about their loss. And that's never going to go away for them. So again, thank you all for all that you do here, firefighters, police officers, and all of the city staff. We have a lot of city staff here. I know that's not visible on the camera right now, but again, it really is heartwarming for me over the years of doing this ceremony to see us all here, and it's all become better and better. And I think that the 20-year anniversary may resonate something in the air, if you will, because it feels more significant for me this time. When we watched the color guard bringing in the flag, it was more meaningful than a normal presentation of colors. So thank you again, and let's take a moment to throughout the day to just be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Leong. And now, Councilmember Peter Chan.
Thank you, Chief Halleck, and thank you, Chief Gordon, for your emotional speech that reflects what's happened 20 years ago. That 9/11 incident 20 years ago really changed the world. Significant change. Americans, our lives were changed forever. We gave up some kind of freedom, some privacies for the sake of security, for the sake of safety. But it's a good sacrifice. Compare those sacrifices that each one of us suffered to the firefighters, to the police officers, to the veterans that protect us, is nothing. Nothing at all. We only gave up a little bit for the sake of the whole world and the whole country and for mankind. So today, we should reflect on the history and look forward on what is going to happen in the future. And we want to thank the frontliners, the military personnel, firefighters, police officers that sacrificed themselves, sacrificed their lives to protect all of us from more horrific incidents that may happen to us. There was a saying for the terrorists, they can only be lucky for once, and they do a lot of damage. But for law enforcement and first responders, all they need is one little mistake, and a lot of devastation can happen. So we have to thank them, appreciate them for their time, sacrifice for all of us. So I just wish that 9/11, 2001 will never happen again for the sake of mankind. So thank you, firefighters, police officers, veterans, for all you have done for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Chan. City Clerk Vincent Chang.
Thank you, Chief Halleck. Thank you, Chief Kelly, Gordon. Well, September 11th was to be another ordinary day for me. That was the day that I had another hearing in court for my client. Nothing really special. woke up, saw something about a plane flying into a building. Well, I was worried about something else. I was worried about what's going to happen to my client that day. I was preparing for my case. And then I thought about what's going to happen. And when I started realizing this was not just a plane accident, this was a deliberate act on Americans. So I worried about what's going to happen to my clients? What's going to happen to all the folks that, you know, who's doing this? You know, we didn't know at first. And so those are kind of questions in my mind. And I went to court. And in those days, we didn't have Facebook really, and we didn't have all the technology that we had today. So, you know, we still went to court because we weren't sure, you know, whether it was closed or not. And as it turned out, of course, you know, court was closed, and we just, you know, sat in the courtroom for a moment there to talk about what's going on and wondering what's going on. We heard different rumors. We heard that the first interstate tower, I think that was what it was called back then, was going to be the next target, because what happened in New York, what happened in Philadelphia, and subsequent to that. So, you know, all sorts of questions were around. And somebody brought in a television set to the courtroom. And as we watched the different horrible sceneries that was taking place, we were truly amazed at those that were going the other direction. Instead of running out, they were heading in. They were heading into that dust, that smoke. I mean, you know, the pride that we felt, I think, was overwhelming that day. You know, for those who went in, our first responders, our firefighters, our police officers, you know, it was just truly overwhelming. So it was a day that we certainly will never forget. But, you know, for me, what do we learn out of September 11th was the unity that came afterwards. Is the fact that for the world, we were Americans. For the terrorists, we were Americans. It didn't matter what color we were. It didn't matter what country we came from. On that day, they attacked America. You know, they didn't attack certain people, but they attacked America. So that unity that we felt as Americans, I sure hope that we will have that back one day, and that's my hope for the future. And thank you to our first responders. You know, you guys are great, so it's always comforting to know that they'll be there for us when we need them. Thank you.
Thank you, City Clerk Vincent Chang. I'd now like to introduce Congressmember Judy Chu.
Thank you, Monterey Park, for always making sure that we remember the 3,000 innocent lives lost in New York and at the Pentagon and on Flight 93. Out of all the cities in my congressional district, you are the one that has ensured every single year that those lives are remembered, and that we will not forget not just the lives lost, but the lessons we learned in the days that followed. I still remember that morning vividly. I was serving in the California State Assembly when, in my Sacramento apartment, I woke up to the images of two planes crashing into the iconic Twin Towers, the clear blue sky of that Tuesday morning marred by black smoke. I remember my heart sinking, and it was only the beginning. Reports followed of the plane hitting the Pentagon and another going down in Pennsylvania. And in the midst of the horrors, we were shown new heights of heroism as the towers collapsed and debris made the air thick and unbreathable. As all of Manhattan flooded the streets to get to safety, there were others running the other direction, into the debris, up collapsing stairs, and through fire to find survivors, to find even a single life to save. Miles away, the Pennsylvania plane, Flight 93, was brought down by brave passengers who rose up, sacrificing themselves to save untold numbers of lives. These passengers and responders and their selfless bravery became the symbol of the day and the days to follow. America was not going to be torn apart by the terrorist attacks. We were going to come together and emerge stronger. Thanks to the incredible bravery of our first responders and law enforcement, that is what we did. And through their heroism and hard work every single day, we have successfully prevented another major terrorist attack since then. And there are lessons from those days. We must remember to not let security become an excuse to erode civil liberties. For many Americans who are innocent Muslim, Arab, Sikh, or South Asian Americans, in the days, months, and years following September 11th meant more suspicion, more harassment, and too often more violence. Threatening somebody's civil rights because of their race, religion, or ethnicity is not just a threat to those people, it's a threat to the unity we felt as a nation after September 11th. Also, 20 years later, as threats of terrorism, both new and old, continue to threaten the U.S. and the world, our counterterrorism strategy has evolved as well. We have withdrawn from Afghanistan, but in Washington, we must ensure that we stay vigilant and be prepared against terrorism from Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and others. And we will continue to use every resource we have, from the military to diplomacy to working with our allies, to disrupt those who would support terrorism like Iran or the Taliban, while not condemning another generation to a forever war. And so, as we remember the 3,000 lives lost on this day 20 years ago, mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters, let us vow to honor their memory and the memory and service of first responders by remembering that we are one country, one United States of America, and when we are united, we are strong.
Thank you, Congressmember Chu. I would now like to ask Florencio Briones from the Office of Hilda Solis to come forward.
Thank you, Chief Halleck. Thank you, Chief Gordon. Thank you to the Council. Thank you to all of our first responders who are here today. My name is Florencio Briones. I'm Deputy Supervisor representing Supervisor Hilda Solis, Chair of the Board of Supervisors, representing the 1st District. Today's a very somber day. We've heard a lot of stories, some firsthand, of what we experienced on September 11, 2001. I was a young man at the time. I was just 18, my first job, waking up that morning, watching the news, not really understanding what was going on, being confused, thinking, this is a replay of the attack from 1992. And it was only after several minutes that I realized that this was not, a replay of that attack. This was something going on now, today, and it was happening. And then understanding the impact that it was going to have on all of our lives. Like Chief Gordon, I had prepared remarks, but I think I'm going to speak from the heart as well. So many of the individuals that I grew up with joined the military shortly after 9/11. Many of them went into Afghanistan, many of them went into Iraq. A young woman that I went to school with, Marisol Heredia, was one of the first individuals to die in Iraq, one of the first service members to die in Iraq. I have friends that I grew up with who I'm in contact now who served multiple tours of duty, saw combat, and who today face PTSD. The impacts of 9/11 will be felt for generations to come. It's one of those events that changes the world, and it had a dramatic impact on every single person. Today we're here not just to remember the lives that were lost, but to celebrate those who ran into the fray to take care of those who needed the help and the assistance at the time. I think it's easy to look back today and in hindsight say we could have done something different or we should have done something else. But in the moment, you do what you can with the information that you have. And I think for us today, the best that we can do is to reflect on what it means to be an American, what it means to be part of a society that looks after one another, and to make sure that we stand up for justice and don't, like the Congresswoman said, don't use security as an excuse to erode civil liberties. So on behalf of the supervisor, I'd like to say thank you to the City of Monterey Park, to the council, and to all of our first responders here today as we remember 9/11. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie Lex Rodriguez from Susan Rubio's office.
Good morning. Good morning, City Council members, Congresswoman Judy Chu, police force, chiefs, and any other firefighters or first responders here today. My name is Jamilex Rodriguez, and I am the district representative for Senator Susan Rubio. I will be honorably speaking on her behalf, as she tried everything in her power to be here today, but could not make it because yesterday night she was in Sacramento, late in session. I am here to speak on her behalf, to talk about our memories, and remember a day in history that marked the United States forever. Today, we remember September 11th. We all have memories connected to the day of the attacks. That day was a defining moment for this country. Senator Susan Rubio personally knew of a family that grew up without a mother because she was on one of the flights on that tragic day. And for that family, and for so many others, their world was never the same. But as tragic as that day was, it lit a fire in the United States. We came together as one American family. It seemed every car had an American flag. Every window had a sign that read, "We stand together." It inspired so many to say, "I am ready to serve." So as we recognize that day, let us continue to remember and acknowledge the brave men and women who stepped forward. In such a divisive time like today, I also ask that we remember it didn't matter who you were, what political party you were in. As one country, we stood together. We mourned together. We confronted the challenges together. We uplifted each other. I hope that soon we can return to that. So let us never forget that day and continue sending prayers to the victims, the families, and thank the first responders for their great service that day. I ask all of us to find a way to be of public service that day as a remembrance. And since I have the opportunity, I also want to mention the brave sons and daughters we lost in the recent attack in Kabul, Afghanistan. Senator Susan Rubio's heart goes out to all the families who lost loved ones. Our senator is a part of a family who is in the military and have military members serving out in the U.S. Army and are now in Germany. And we can't imagine that loss. Senator would like to highlight those from California. Sergeant Nicole L. Gee, age 23, from Sacramento, California. Corporal Hunter Lopez, age 22, from Indio, California. Lance Corporal Dylan Marola, age 20, from Rancho Cucamonga, California. And also Lance Corporal Kareem Nikwi, age 20, from Norco, California, who also spent some time as a child in our San Gabriel Valley. Our heartfelt condolences to their families. We are forever grateful for their sacrifice. I would like to thank the military families for the sacrifices and thank the veterans attending for being symbols of the greatness of our country. So many Americans don't get a chance to see what true patriotism looks like. We hope our remembrances today give you all some solace. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to the City of Monterey Park, our police force, our Congress member today for being here. And thank you to the City of Monterey Park for organizing this event in honor of a day that is remembered as the most tragic in American history, but serves as a reminder that in times of tragedy, we unite and have each other. Thank you.
Thank you. School Board Member Vin No.
Thank you, Chief Halleck and Chief Gordon, and City Council member, as well as Congresswoman Chu. I'm just glad to be here and just wanted to reflect on celebrating Patriot Day and the City of Monterey Park for having this event. As Police Chief Gordon mentioned earlier, let's not watch the news. Most of us lived through that day. Let's reflect going forward on what we learned that day, Patriot Day, and that is the strength of American independence, unity, and also the compassion of all our first responders. And always, liberty, American first. Thank you.
Thank you. We will close our time of remembrance with a fire service tradition that dates back to the mid-1800s. Long before there were radios or cell phones, fire alarms and daily announcements were sent from headquarters to firehouses by a system of bell commands and telegraph. When a firefighter died in the line of duty, headquarters would transmit in a series of 4 with 5 bell strikes each. This custom has continued through the years to this day. It is a form of rendering final honors to departed comrades. In the fire service, this is known as striking of the 4 5s. I would like to ask everyone to please rise for a moment of silence and the striking of the 4 5s by Monterey Park Fire Engineer David Marquardt. Thank you. Please be seated. I would like to thank all of our speakers today that spoke to the remembrance of this special date. I'd also like to thank Robert Aguirre and his staff for putting this event together for us, and I'd also like to thank all other city staff that came out today to remember the events of September 11th, 2001. I would also like to thank Luke Loader from the University of California at Riverside, who is our bagpipe player, for doing such a wonderful job. This concludes our ceremony, and thank you all for being here for this day of remembrance.